During the First Crusade, the armies of the Church captured the Holy City. Under the most holy of temples, the Knights Templar discovered secret vaults, and within them, an ancient demonic artifact. The Templars, blinded by greed and with weakness in their hearts, fell to their knees. They had found a new lord. Seeing the unholy wisdom of which the artifact spoke, they began trafficking with devils and committing all manners of unspeakable rites. This was the first heresy. The armies of the Church retreated, and Jerusalem became a depraved pit where hell and our mortal plane now bled into one. For 8 centuries, the Church has waged its crusade to take back the Holy City. The landscape has been utterly devastated, crisscrossed with thousands of miles of mud, trenches, and craters. The crusade is now waged with armies wielding terrifying weaponry, and both sides conjure up supernatural beings of such immense power they are nigh unstoppable. Even with such incalculable might, the armies are at a stalemate. This is the Trench Crusade. A brief and incomplete timeline of the Trench Crusade. 1099. First Crusade captures Jerusalem. The Knights Templar commit the act of ultimate heresy. The gate of hell is opened on earth, and Jerusalem is destroyed in the cataclysm. 1101. The year of 3 battles. Heretics, reinforced by the armies of the Third Circle of Hell, conquer most of the Levant. 1102. The ancient city of Antioch is fortified and becomes the focal point of resistance against the forces of hell. 1106. Kobar becomes the first tyrant of the 66. 1109. The great sultanate of the invincible iron wall of the 2 horns that pierce the sky is formed. In the coming decades, it unifies the Islamic factions. The great iron wall of Iskander re-emerges and is fortified against the heretics. 1117. The legendary 17 martyrs travel to the earthly domains of hell to convert the heretics. Captured, tortured, and kept in a perpetual state of agony, they remain trapped within white-hot brazen bulls to this day. 1165. The old man in the mountains and his Hessassians defend the mountain fortress of Alamut. The castle stands to this very day, despite being besieged for hundreds of years. 1215 through 1306. The Wars of Triclavianism. The Church is split and fights a fierce internal conflict. Heretic domains extend as the faithful fight against each other. Millions perish by sword and fire. 1346 through 1353. Beelzebub unleashes the Black Grail. Tens of millions are infected, becoming metastatic vessels in the worst plague in the history of mankind. The Corpse Wars begin. 1429. Living Saint Jeanne d'Arc drives the Black Grail from mainland Europe. 1477. The city of Argos is taken by God, and it is no more. 1503. War prophet Angelos, guided by Saint Elegius, discovers the formula of orichalcum steel. Though extremely costly to produce, the metal proves to be effective against all missile weapons and is still used to this day. 1545. Antioch destroyed utterly by a mysterious infernal weapon. 1573. Sacred Order of the Dragon halts the heretic advance after the destruction of Byzantium. 1,000,000 heretics impaled in the hills of Wallachia. 1595. Walls of New Antioch completed. 1666. The Year of Six Woes. In a surprise raid, the newly created heretic fleet captures Gibraltar. The sea fortress becomes the heretic base of operations against Europe. Forces of hell gain access to the Atlantic. 1670. Due to the constant coastal raids by the heretic fleet, the Crown of England begins the construction of the Fortress of the White Cliffs. 1703. Against all odds, a small force of Hebrew knights, striking from their secret fortress, destroy the Templar stronghold at Acre. 1805. Heretic fleet, under the command of High Captain Ranga, defeats the fleet of England in the Battle of the Bloodied Cliffs. Admiral Nelson is slain in combat. 1866. In utmost secrecy, heretic scientists, aided by the demon Marbas, construct the first modern submarines. 1870. Launched from Gibraltar, the heretic submarine fleets extract a heavy toll on the merchant navies. Widespread famine ensued. 1872. Heretic forces storm the city of Rijeka. It is fortified, and heretic conquest is launched against the European mainland. 1894. The Year of Broken Trinity. The Death Commandos simultaneously assassinate the Supreme Pontiff, the High Prophetess Aelia, and the Holy Roman Emperor. The faithful are thrown into turmoil. The heretic legions, commanded by Hell's nobles of the Seventh Circle and a huge vanguard of tanks, launch a simultaneous lightning offensive in the Levant and Europe. 1899. The Church space program commences. 1907. The construction of the moving fortress of Britannia is completed. 1910. Battle of Cordoba. A bloody stalemate. Heretic artillery devastates the ancient city, but the heretic forces fail to gain access to the heartlands of Hispania. 1914. The present day. Both sides are preparing for major offensive operations. In the huge swaths of no man's land, furious skirmishes and raids increase in intensity as the faithful and the heretic vie for information, powerful relics, and securing strategically important positions. Armaments of the Trench Crusade. After raging for 8 centuries, the Great War has produced a bewildering variety of weaponry, equipment, and armor, and due to the power of both heaven and hell taking active role on the battlefields, a war band participating in the Trench Crusade often has a fascinating an exotic panoply of both ancient and modern weapons. It was the work of the followers of Saint Eligius, the patron saint of metal workers, that allowed the weaponsmiths and armorers of the Holy See to produce steel alloys imbued with divine light, metals more malleable and harder than any normal steel. Though the cost is enormous, suits of armor can be wrought that are able to withstand a hail of bullets. This excellence of the infantry field armor remains to this day, keeping abreast with the advances of firearms and explosives. Meanwhile, the heretic legions have gained access to hellish metals from the twisted crucibles of Tartarus, exceeding the strength of mundane steel, though often at a terrible cost. For carrying such weapons, or donning an infernal suit of armor, burns both the body and the soul, leaving behind festering wounds that never heal. Thanks to these advances in metallurgy, Titanic artillery pieces exceeding 300 feet are constructed in the foundries of New Antioch, while the forges of hell turn out truly colossal machines of death of their own. The largest known piece, the dreaded Mouth of Hell, measuring a staggering 666 feet in length, and boasting 1,666 millimeters in caliber. The massive artillery barrages pockmark no man's land, creating a hellscape on earth between the heretic and the faithful forces. It is over these pieces of land that the war bands of both sides travel, scouring every inch for usable weapons, holy objects of power, ammo, food, armor, and more. Due to the protection offered by modern armor, close-quarter combat is frequent and brutal. Trench clubs and polearms, lead-tipped great maces, and hell-forged swords are all used to deadly effect when storming enemy trenches. Enemies, such as heretic anointed, are often so heavily armored that only concentrated effort can bring one of these survivors of the lake of fire down. And even then, they often have to be finished off in brutal melee combat with misericordia daggers, looking for a chink in their unholy armor. Those brave or suicidal enough wield anti-tank hammers, polearms with explosives powerful enough to tear apart even the strongest of armor. Still, the humble bolt-action rifle is the workhorse of the battlefield, and most Yemen soldiery, such as heretic legionnaires, carry it. Many other weapons, though rarer, are in common use. Machine guns, sniper rifles, grenades of both shrapnel and gas variety, as well as experimental anti-material rifles. While the heretic forces are equipped with blades of eternally burning fire, living bullets that infect their targets and turn them into undead metastatic vessels, forever bound in servitude to the devils, and heavy flamethrowers forged in the higher pits of D's, belching the flames of the lake of fire where damned souls wither for all eternity. With both infernal and divine powers actively at work on earth, holy icons, symbols, cursed trinkets, and unholy artifacts are carried by soldiery of all ranks. Their power is undeniable and has turned the tide of many a battle. Martyrdom pills are taken regularly by Trench Crusaders, looking to take the enemies of God down with them. They inure the faithful against pain and exhaustion, but extract a brutal toll after their effect wanes. Many trench pilgrims wear iron capirotes that both shield their minds from the horror of the creatures of hell, but also incorporate a gas mask in their design, a useful feature on battlefields where the use of chlorine and mustard gas, as well as more dire fumes created by the twisted chemists in the Bulgius of Inferno, is commonplace. Elite forces have even more advanced and esoteric equipment and arms. For example, the observers of the Synod of Strategic Prophecy wear a specially constructed helmet which allows them to hear the voice of God, and thus allows them to perceive immediate past, present, and future simultaneously to a degree. This allows them to perform martial feats unrivaled, but it comes at a cost. A living human is not meant to hear the holy words, and as the voice of God never decays, they must concentrate with superhuman focus to hear what they need to pick the right course of action. Sleep is impossible with the divine echo ringing in their ears. Heavy sedation and use of mind-altering drugs is necessary for them to withstand the heavy burden of their battlefield role for any length of time. The trench pilgrims of the procession of the sacred affliction are known for their zeal for close quarters combat, their icon armor and shields, which, despite appearances, can withstand machine gun bullets, and the millstones they carry in order to tie them around the necks of sinners before they suffocate them in the mud and blood of no man's land. The Principality of New Antioch. For 300 years, the Principality of New Antioch has stood defiantly as the focal point of the church and the faithful, at the very edge of the shadow cast by the gate of hell. It is the home of all our hopes, the bulwark against heretic forces, and the first line of defense against the devil's might. Should New Antioch fall, all the Levant will be lost. War has never left this corner of the world. The ancient city of Antioch was destroyed by a mysterious demonic weapon in the year 1545, but the faithful never gave up their positions in the ruins. Despite the lethal demonic essence emanating from the crater that was left behind, the garrison held on. Even as mighty Constantinople fell to the legions of Chimaeras, marquis of hell. Before it was destroyed, the ancient city of Antioch was always the first line of defense to be put to test. Thus, it is no wonder that in the year 1559, the Sword Congress of Vienna agreed to rebuild and fortify the city, and that a yearly tithe is to be sent to New Antioch by all the faithful nations, though this levy is rarely in the form of coin. Instead, endless supply trains of foodstuffs, tools, ammunition, weaponry, machinery, and skilled workers and engineers come from across Europa and the Mediterranean Sea, as well as the African dominions. Keeping the supply routes open is a constant game of cat and mouse. as heretic infiltrators and raiders harry the caravans and ships that allow the Principality to exist to this day. Since those days, New Antioch has grown to be the most important fortress city in the world, the sword and the shield of Europa and Africa. All of the princes of the church and heads of the various states and domains who oppose hell understand that it is better to fight their battles against the heretics away from their heartlands. To this day, New Antioch has withstood 8 great sieges, and its famed walls, with their 77 mighty towers, have never been breached. This is partly due to hundreds of Anchorites, metallic battle shrines with devoted entombed within them, that are embedded into the walls, keeping a vigilant watch day and night. More than anything else, it is the volunteers who come to serve under the banner of Christ that ensures the continuous existence of the Principality. Thus, in the streets of the city, one can hear hundreds of languages and dialects. One might observe hussars of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth brushing shoulders with the last remnants of the Varangian Guard, or hear the sermons of a street preacher from Erie extolling the soldiery of Ethiopia to lay down their lives for the cause. Perhaps they might even witness the church engineer's procession taking their latest invention to be tested on the front lines. This all happened under the watchful eyes of the Office of the Propagation of Virtue that tirelessly patrol the streets. While they are quite happy to turn a blind eye to the revelries of soldiers, they ferociously persecute even the slightest deviation from church doctrine. The execution of heretics is a weekly spectacle that draws immense crowds. Factories spew black smoke as newly constructed tanks roll out of the workshops. Foundries burn white hot day and night in order to keep the artillery battalions, the pride and joy of New Antioch, at full strength. In the techno-laboratories of the city, the church toils away in creating the superhuman communicants empowered by the cloned flesh and blood of the Redeemer. Thousands of workers give their lives in horrific accidents and overwork each year, and great statues celebrating their sacrifices stand around the city. Despite all these preparations, it is a grim reality that New Antioch could never withstand the full onslaught of the combined heretic forces. It is only thanks to the ferocious and bloody internal conflict amongst the devils that has allowed the Principality to stand to this day. The archdevils and princes of hell bicker and plot against each other, and only rarely does one of them gain supremacy for long enough to mount a full-scale invasion. Even though the war has stretched for centuries, with decades of nervous lull between great battles, the rulers of hell are immortal, and to them, the war has barely even started. They are beings that have existed before there was time, and wish to savor the agony of the mortals who die in their millions. And thus, the great war rages on, sometimes with long years of silence, followed by sudden, ferocious assaults. As the nominal supreme commander of all the faithful armed forces, the Duke of New Antioch is a title of unrivaled prestige and honor. But despite swearing fealty to the Duke, in reality, troops who come to do battle against hell from across all of Christendom operate in units of their own, taking commands from their own leaders. It is worth noting that some soldiers renounce their citizenship and take up the cross and come to serve under Duke Constantine alone. Thus, the standing army of the Principality is the greatest single fighting force the faithful can muster, and those who serve on the walls of the Home of Hopes are rightfully proud of their livery. Observers. When the need is great, the Synod of Strategic Prophecy sends their famed observers to support the war effort. This order of warrior monks lives a life of absolute solitude, sharpening their minds and bodies to make themselves living weapons in the hand of God. Once a soldier joins the order, they very rarely leave the temple of the Word, the only exception being when they are summoned to the battlefield, a situation where their unique abilities can decisively shift the balance in favor of the faithful. Even the slightest disturbance to their prayers or training will mean that they will not be able to commune with the Lord of all creation. Thus, the days of the observers are spent in secluded cloistered cells, when not practicing their martial or mental disciplines. Observers wear a specially crafted oculus helmet, enabling them to attune to the voice of God. This remarkable connection grants them the capacity to simultaneously perceive the immediate past, present, and future to a degree. This allows them to perform martial feats unrivaled, but a living human is not meant to hear the holy words, so it comes at a cost. Since the voice of God never decays, they must concentrate with superhuman focus to extricate the righteous guidance amidst the narrative spanning from creation's inception to the present moment. The resonance of the divine echo ringing ceaselessly in their ears renders sleep impossible. Therefore, they must resort to potent sedatives and mind-altering drugs for them to endure the heavy burden of their battlefield role for any length of time. The observers diligently practice the recitation of the words of God, granting them the power to issue commands to anyone they address, friend or foe. The special metal of their helmets allow them to replicate the holy word as closely as it is possible, compelling any creature in creation to obey them momentarily to a degree. Though they master many weapons, the trench polearm stands as the preferred choice for the observers. This tool allows them to skillfully vault over barbed wire and drop into enemy trenches with devastating force. Guided by the omniscient words of the Almighty, they possess the ability to evade nearly any strike. With proper focus, they foresee impending attacks within the crystal of the Eye of God that is incorporated into their helmet. As such, enemies' efforts to take them down are often frustrated, since the observer simply moves the minimum required to avoid any harm, knowing precisely where the blow of the heretic was going to land. However, even the slightest slip in their concentration means that they might lose the voice of God that guides them, rendering them just as vulnerable to death as any other mortal soldier. Paladins. Since the beginning of the Great War, some 800 years ago, the faithful have faced a problem that is seemingly impossible to overcome. They are unable to take the battle to the enemy. For such is the supernatural power of the open gate to hell, that even approaching within sight of it is impossible for all but the most strong-willed and pious. Within the inferno await domains of the lost and legions of devils. But, in utmost secrecy, the Church produced an answer to this quandary: the Paladin program. Paladins are by far the greatest creations of the Mentalist order. They are near perfect communicants, for in their veins flows the purest blood that the Metachrist program has been able to produce. Paladins are warriors with such physical stature and inner holiness that not only can they approach Jerusalem's vale of tears, but also enter the very gates of Inferno and undertake missions within hell itself and return to tell the tale. Each is said to represent near perfection of human form, both mind and body, though much scarred and burned from the long centuries of war they had been forced to endure for the sake of all in creation. Paladins reside in secluded cells within a secret wing of Castel Sant'Angelo until the hour comes when the Council of Saints sends them forth to do battle. In such time, the Paladin emerges from their seclusion. They go to their arming chamber and kneel at the center upon the mosaic of the militant Christ the Lion. They are then armed and armored by blinded and gelded serfs, for no impure gaze or carnal desire is to fall upon the Paladin by the servants of the Church, and briefed on their mission by one of the cardinal generals. They are given the last rites prehumously should they fall, for there is no mission more dangerous than the war within Gehenna. Originally, there were 12 Paladins, but now only 9 remain. 2 have fallen in battle, and it is rumored one has turned traitor, though the Church vehemently denies such slander upon pain of death. Despite ceaseless efforts, the Holy Mentalist Order have been unable to produce even a single new Paladin in the last 3 centuries. It has proven just as difficult to replace their holy armor and weaponry. Since the destruction of the holy city of Jerusalem, it has not been possible to harvest more Golgothic tektites required for the machining process for the Paladins' armaments. Thus, their elaborate suits of armor, despite the fastidious care of the dicastery of the service of Church militant disciples, are much scarred, burned, and corroded, and many pieces of armor have been slated to be reforged in a vain hope that even the tiniest shard of the required materials could be recovered. Thus, each Paladin is forced to endure searing pain like no earthly suffering where their armor has weakened, relying on their unshakable faith during their lonely crusades into perdition. Each of the 9 circles of hell has its own foul atmosphere and deadly environment, from noxious fumes to burning heat, or bitter coldness below absolute zero, requiring a specific suit of armor to withstand the infernal elements. Thus, when a paladin enters the gates of hell, they know they must succeed alone or die trying. No help will be forthcoming, not even from one within their own order. Paladins are only used under the orders of the Council of Saints, and even then, extremely sparingly. Each mission they undertake must bring great and tangible benefits for the Church and the overall war effort, and its long-term benefit must be determined by the Synod of Strategic Prophecy. Paladins are tasked with missions such as exterminating key nobles of hell, destroying laboratories creating some new devastating variant of the Black Grail, or interrogating devils with holy fire and the blood of the Lamb until they give up their infernal plans. Trench Pilgrims. As the war rages against the minions of hell, strange visions torment the faithful across the globe. Men and women touched by heaven are granted visions, and revelations are made by the messengers of God. Sisters of the holy orders are marked by stigmata and take up sword and cross as instructed by the angels. Those who have transgressed seek to atone for their sins by taking as many followers of the devil with them to the afterlife. So they come, the mad and the maimed, the God-touched and the guilt-ridden, all gathering around prophets and prophetesses, forming trench pilgrim processions, disorganized groups which arm themselves and follow the prophets of the Lord unto the front lines. They fight with unrivaled zeal, throwing themselves against the heretics and arming themselves with anything they can get their hands on, from the oldest muskets to scourges and Molotov cocktails. Pilgrims are not officially sanctioned by the Holy See, but the Church still blesses the crusades of the faithful. Thus, the pilgrim processions are a common sight on the battlefields, often charging across no man's land in suicidal assaults against the heretics, directed by the visions of the prophets and prophetesses who lead them, and urged on by the whips of the castigators who are charged with instilling the fear of God in their troops. The bulk of the pilgrims are men and women with little military training, but when they don the iron capirote of the trench pilgrim, they can face even a demon from the deepest bulgiest of hell unflinchingly. Nor is death necessarily an end to their mission. Sometimes, the seventh Metachrist will deem a fallen pilgrim worthy and bring them back as martyr penitents, warriors halfway between heaven and earth, able to fight once more and feel no pain from bullet or bayonet thrust. Rarer and more dangerous are the stigmatic nuns, holy sisters who manifest wounds to match those of the third Metachrist, whom the nuns venerate. They excel in close quarters combat, for each bleeding wound that they suffer makes them stronger, not weaker, as their devotion to suffering as their Lord once did gives them strength and endurance not found on mere common mortals. Armed with swords and pistols, they cross no man's land heedless of the danger, praying to sustain wounds for the Redeemer, which in turn will transform them into the very vengeance of the Lord. In front of the trench pilgrims are driven the ecclesiastic prisoners, either captured enemies of the true faith, forced to make a final act of contrition, or volunteer sinners seeking redemption. Each is strapped with high explosives, which are detonated once they reach the enemy lines. They dash across the killing grounds, hoping to either miraculously survive the blast and escape, or take as many followers of Lucifer with them as they can, depending on their convictions. The most puissant of pilgrim processions will be accompanied by a shrine Anchorite, a metal behemoth some 12 feet tall, a living altar of war almost completely immune to any damage. The interior of the Anchorite is covered in spikes and barbed hooks, so that the monks who control this colossus is in a constant state of torment, rejoicing in the pain so they can suffer as their Lord once did. In combat, they wield adamantine Catherine wheels of massive proportions, which they use to crush the sinners and heretics into a pulp, and then string them upon the wheel as a warning to others. There is a bewildering number and variety of trench pilgrim processions. The penitents of pious revenge swear in the name of Saint Olga and use flamethrowers, burning grenades, and incendiary ammunition to assail the heretics. The pilgrims of the Iron Path follow Saint Rita of Cassia and go to battle with hammers, mauls, maces, and cudgels, and hammer nails into their head in the memory of the saint they venerate. The Theban Legion of Rome carries the heads of the heretics upon their standards in the memory of their patron, Saint Maurice. They fight with swords and other blades, competing with each other for the number of heretic heads they amass. Shrine Anchorite. Shrine Anchorites are metal behemoths some 12 to 15 feet tall, a living altar of war almost completely immune to any damage, with a diesel engine belching smoke and trumpets echoing with prayers. The interior of the Anchorite is covered in spikes and barbed hooks, so that the monk pilot is in a constant state of torment, rejoicing in their pain so they can suffer as their Lord once did. The exterior is festooned with icons, holy relics, and devotional prayer scrolls, each according to the traditions of the pilgrim sect that the Anchorite serves. The first Anchorites were built a long time ago in the fortress monastery of Velahrad in Great Moravia. Several hundred of these battle machines were built under the guidance of Saint Methodius, though now the craft is lost, as the monastery was destroyed by a death commando infiltration force of the demon Marcosius. Later innovations of the engineering foundry of New Antioch created machine armor, a far smaller but more maneuverable personal protective suit based upon the Anchorite design. But the pilgrim processions have neither access to these marvels of modern engineering, nor do they have any desire to give up their Anchorites, which act both as fearsome engines of war, as well as mobile shrines that form a focal point to the prayers and devotions of the Pilgrims. The pilot monk or nun, once installed, never leaves the shrine Anchorite until the day they die. Once they fall in battle, or rarely of old age, their remains are reverently removed, and body parts are preserved in reliquaries mounted upon the Anchorite. Thus, each of these war machines is a testament to its long history of war against the forces of hell. In battle, each Anchorite carries a great adamantine Catherine wheel, as well as an immense bone-breaker mace to bring the wrath of God upon the sinners, heretics, and apostates. In a show of piety and atonement, it is a common practice for trench pilgrims or stigmatic nuns to volunteer to be broken on the wheel and serve in their final battle mounted upon this device of execution, as a sign of both their willingness to suffer for their sins and for the spiritual protection their sacrifice is said to grant to the Anchorite. The church frowns upon this custom, but pilgrims flock to their Anchorites on the eve of any battle, hoping to be granted the honor of perishing upon the wheel.